Well, Lee Smith had it exactly right when he described the MOU before the details were released, and how Vance was riding point and anticipated how that would go, and it went just about as well as he thought it would, which is to say not well, which was my immediate reaction too, as we discussed for the last several weeks, particularly when Vance said things that were just impossible to believe. Frankly, insulting to one's intelligence, like the idea that the Iranians had turned over a new leaf and were ready to reject the last 47 years of their existence as a mistaken approach to relations with the United States. Sorry. We have to call things as they are. That was a ridiculous statements. Lee Smith writing in Tablet again, where things stand. The White House's Iran strategy looks out of sync, not because it's a sophisticated ploy to keep Tehran off guard. The United States is a superpower and doesn't have to devise some convoluted Levantine strategy to catch a mouse. The policy looks haphazard because the president has not decided to take back what has been under U.S. control for nearly a century. Trump has not decided, not yet anyway, on winning. And he's talking about the Strait. He goes on to say, the Iranian officials who have so far survived Operation Epic Fury are likely to be more certain of victory now than ever before, since the regime has already absorbed very serious blows. It's difficult to see how hitting them more and hitting them harder will make any difference unless Trump decides to strike Iranians at what has long been understood to be their center of gravity, the Strait of Hormuz. A journalist asked Vance, this is Lee Smith's writing, journalist asked Vance in the press briefing last week if that wasn't essentially the condition the administration had created with its phony ceasefires, fruitless negotiations, and tit-for-tat exchanges of fire. The question of quote-unquote forever wars. Vance's response, so far the Iranians are not showing any signs of wanting to give what you want them to give, said the journalist. That's the journalist, addressing Vance. The plan right now is basically when they misbehave to keep bombing. Vance disagreed, saying it's not a forever war if Iranians violate the terms of an agreement and shoot commercial shipping, and we respond to it. As Lee Smith writes, that was the vice president's response, seemingly without understanding he was just rephrasing the question the journalist had put to him. Lee Smith goes on this matter of forever wars, which has divided MAGA to some extent. That's precisely the stuff America's forever wars have been made of. The continuation of hostilities without defining victory and making decisive moves to obtain it. The reason America doesn't win wars is not that it wants to turn tribal confederations into liberal democracies or teach surrealism to veiled schoolgirls or sow corruption abroad and reap the profits. Those are all effects of the fundamental problem, which is deciding, for whatever reasons, not to win. For Trump, the choices are stark. Either preside over another American war without resolve and go down in history as the American president who forfeited America's post-war birthright and lost the Strait, or decide to win. Some of the military analysts on Fox News didn't put it in those terms exactly, but suggested there is a path, but it requires, as Lee Smith is saying, decisiveness. Here's retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg.
Neutralize both of those as strategic targets, either by occupation or whatever it's going to take. You basically control their economy. If you control their economy, I think they start to break. You're looking at strategic targets. You're not talking about a ground invasion of Iran. You can't get there. It's too hard to do. The country is too large. I've seen war games on that. You just can't get to it. So if he does something strategically, and he takes these targets out, being Kharg Island and the Straits of Hormuz.
And retired General Jack Keane offered other things that can be done.
is we can put more pressure on the Iranians by going after their national infrastructure. Some of that was discussed right here. And that's power plants, it's energy sources, it's airports, it's ports. You want to also isolate Iran completely from the countries that surround it, that they're trading with and getting things out and getting things in, because so much is being denied from them at sea. So there's a lot of things that can be done here to bend them to our will. In the minds of the both military commanders on the IDF and CENTCOM, we had about 2 weeks to finish it. And that's still out there. I think the sooner we finish it, the sooner we end the problem with oil prices and the rest of it. The longer we drag this out, the longer you have that problem existing. I'm not minimizing the problem. I think, listen, political objectives, economic objectives are real issues. Every president has to contend with them. And how you balance that against military objectives and dealing with this regime is the president's decision, and I respect that decision. But there is a means here. We can finish these guys and put them in a place where they're on the pathway to collapse. And I think we're on the pathway now.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. Now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us, as always.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So what about what Lee Smith said? It's up to Trump right now to decide if he wants to win or go down as the American president who forfeited America's post-war birthright and lost the strait. And if you agree with that formulation, then what do you have to say about the observations of Kellogg and Keene?
Well, I don't agree 100% with Lee. I think he's being a little dramatic. He's a wonderful writer, and he was writing very emotionally there. I think we do need to finish it. I think that is the way forward. I never had a lot of faith in an ability to do it by negotiations with the present regime that's there. Those guys are just too much of true believers who are willing to die and take their whole nation with them because they think they're doing what God wants them to do. It's a little, they don't negotiate things like that away. So I think the whole thing about America's birthright for the last 100 years, no offense, we don't have a birthright to the Straits of Hormuz, but we controlled it after the war,
right?
In World War II, and it made sense to keep it. It's never been Iran's. That was, to suddenly make that a negotiating point was kind of nutty. But as we talked about before, the president really wanted to do this with negotiations rather than just obliterate the country. Again, this idea that because we're still fighting now, we're somehow in a forever war. No offense to all these people who come up with that nonsense, but wars don't get over with in 2 weeks, hardly anywhere. You can go in and do a raid in less than 2 weeks, but if you're talking about significant strategic objectives, it's not going to happen in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but
anybody who says if it goes beyond that, we're in some sort of,
forever war, right?
Forever war. That's just stupid.
Well, but here's the thing, though. The president has created that problem to some extent because it was for 4 or 5 weeks and this thing is over. And then while negotiations were going on, he's not formally, but rhetorically rolling out the mission accomplished banner over and over again. And so, it's an expectations game. And he created those expectations significantly. The other thing I want to get you to respond to is, how many weeks does it take to figure out that this is not going anywhere? The gay Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, on his X account, whoever writes for him, the repeated breaches of the agreement by the great Satan regarding the MOU signed by the presidents of Iran and the U.S. have once again laid bare a fundamental truth. The signature of the U.S. president is utterly worthless and devoid of credibility, blah, blah, blah. But then Aragachi, the foreign minister, said to, now this is, state-run TV, so you take it with a grain of salt, everything that comes there, but it's an interesting thing to say, saying that he hasn't actually talked to Khamenei, who was reportedly out of the country. So now we were negotiating all this time with somebody who's not even talking to ostensibly the guy in charge, and all of it feels like a game of whack-a-mole anyway, because they're the idea that there's some moderate element that is trying to force its way through the thicket of extremists to get a deal with the United States that they'll abide was ridiculous from the face. So this was 2 months of this pointless back and forth.
I'm with you on that. I think this was not a worthwhile effort. The president, who, you're right, he does declare victory over and over again. That's a bad habit. That's not good public relations, and it's darn sure not good policy. I think we need to, as we've done in the last 9 days, we need to turn up the heat. We need to expand the target list beyond just the stuff on the straits. We're still not sinking every vessel that comes off of the shore, anything that can shoot missiles or anything like that. Why we allow that to continue, I don't know. I think that's a bad policy. Same with anything that flies. We should have enough assets there to make sure that anything that flies, whether it's a Radio Shack drone or something bigger or a missile, it should get shot down as soon as it gets launched. We can have that kind of coverage, but we don't seem to be willing to do that. I think going after the infrastructure, as General Keane talked about, it's time. And frankly, the reason for not doing that prior to this is we wanted that stuff to be there so when the Iranian people can be back in charge, they don't have to rebuild everything. Right now, I think the Iranian people would be thrilled to see all that infrastructure go down if it gets rid of this regime.
Well, so
we need to come to that same conclusion.
So that's with respect to essentially destroying Kharg Island, to taking it and occupying it, or more likely destroying it. And that's another question too. If the energy secretary is right, Chris Wright was on this week yesterday saying that there are about 14 million barrels a day coming out of the Gulf between the pipeline workarounds, as well as ships that are still moving through the strait, and now that America is reasserting itself, will be moving through the strait. So we're about 2/3 of post-conflict levels. So if we're that close in this context, then why would you hesitate to further isolate the Iranians and take away their means of self-sustainability? And that would seemingly include taking out Kharg Island.
Yeah, I don't know why not. I would have done it a while ago, and I think that we should do it now. And not just Kharg Island. I mean, there's other infrastructure that is there that can put more pressure on the regime. It will have some effect on the civilian population, but it's not exclusively civilian targeting. It's not like the Iranians hit a desalination plant in Kuwait. That's kind of a little sketchy. But the bridges, the electrical production, all that stuff, that's fair game. And we should be hitting that, because as we do that, that one, pressures the government, but two, energizes the people to realize the government, their own government, are the ones that are screwing them here.
Well,
and they need to rise up.
Well, the hitting the desalination plant in Kuwait is raises the issue you sort of raised before, which is what exactly is their capacity to retaliate, and why haven't we taken out whatever's remaining with respect to that capacity? Because desalination plants in the Middle East are sort of important when you don't have access, when you don't have rain and you don't otherwise have access to water in country like Iran does. And that's the situation with a lot of these Gulf countries. So that could be debilitating for our erstwhile Gulf state allies if that was allowed to continue, or there wasn't some sort of coordinated response to that threat. And so what is the problem in your estimation? I mean, do they have launchers that are sort of shrouded in civilian areas that we're worried about mass civilian casualties if we go after their ballistic missile launch areas, or what is it? Why can't If we have air superiority, then why can't we lay all of this bare and take it out?
It's when you're down to the level that they're down to. They're not like batteries of missiles that are easily spotted, or they're 1 and 2 missile kind of packages that are mobile and spread around. And it's not impossible to hide them, but it's also not that easy to find them when they're down to this level. When they were at 100%, they're everywhere. Targets are kind of easy to find. Now they're down. I think they estimate at about probably 85 to 90% attrition. That 10%, it's not that much to hide in a big country.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to target them, but they're not that tough to hide.
President Trump wanted congressional Republicans to include Iran in a Russia sanctions bill that was supported by Lindsey Graham, and sort of a do it for Lindsey with both of them, Russia and Iran. Is there a new series of sanctions that would be particularly impactful in your estimation, as it pertains to both, but specifically Iran?
They should close down any loopholes that are left, any bennies that they got along the way, either in the past or recently. All should be shut down. They should be allowed no commerce with anyone that we can stop. And anybody who does business with them, we should go after them and sanction them, because that's the only way to stop people from doing that. And then the embargo, the physical blocking of their ability to go in and out, needs to get ramped up even higher so that nothing goes through. And again, if it's got an Iranian flag on it, or we know it's really an Iranian ship, but it's got somebody else's flag, we should either capture it or take it out.
What do you make of this report circulating that Iran is seriously considering a ground incursion into Kuwait to seize U.S. military bases, trying to expand the war?
They could try that, but their ground forces have proven to be pretty inept. That the Iraqis beat them before. They really don't have. They've not spent a lot on their regular ground forces. All of their money goes to the IRGC, which is much smaller and much more focused on internal repression than actually fighting a war. So I don't think they have the capability to do that. And they know if they did, they would very quickly, with us not having to go into Iran, they would lose that military force probably in total within a day or two.
Would that if they did invade Kuwait, would that require a ground forces response from us?
Not initially, no. You could just take them out from standoff as they tried to come in. But eventually, I think we'd probably go in and make sure there was nothing left on the other side of the border.
Mm-hmm. On the 3 soldiers who were killed over the weekend, what if anything should we do? I mean, I understand nothing is fail-safe here, but what should we do with respect to our bases in places like Jordan and other Gulf states that are clearly being targeted by Iran, which of course we knew from the beginning?
We need to just make sure we've got as much air defense capability in there as we can get, as much detection capability, all of our AWACS aircraft, that sort of thing. Maybe we need to upgun that a little bit to make sure we can spot and take out anything that Iran shoots at any of our bases, and just defend it more effectively. We're pretty good at that, but occasionally things get through. A couple of those guys were hurt dealing with a drone that was actually already shot down.
Yeah, right. Detonating a drone.
That's unfortunate.
I wanted to get your response to quickly to something else too. We talked for an hour about it before you joined us, and that was Rubio's speech at the Resurgence of Political Terrorism conference last week, in which he said, among other things, this is what's required for counterterrorism agencies and coordinated coordinated operations among Western countries with respect to the threat that leftist-inspired violence poses.
These are not distinct and isolated cells. They are interconnected networks. They do not recognize our borders. They do not believe, in fact, in the nation state itself. They coordinate, they communicate, they travel, they train, and they act together, sharing the same infrastructure, sharing the same enemies, sharing the same mission. Antifa militants and their comrades travel from across Europe and to the Americas to participate in each other's attacks, to funnel propaganda and training materials and target information through shared encrypted channels, moving through underground networks of safe houses and finance, and sustain their operations through transnational funds.
And so Rubio's point is that essentially is that we need to reorient and really expand our counterterrorism interdiction with respect to leftist violence. It's not just, it is still Islamist in nature, but it's not just Islamist in nature.
I think he's spot on with that. You have to be a little careful because you could take from his remarks that they're like, is it some sort of international council of bad guys somewhere sitting coordinating all this. There really isn't that. There is a lot of cooperation. There's people calling one another. There's a lot of mutual support, but it's not quite as cohesive as one could imply from Rubio's remarks. The secretary's a great speaker. He can be very dramatic too, but I would not, put that level on it. There's not all the James Bond villains sitting around a table figuring out how to do all this stuff.
No.
There's a bunch of groups who are chasing their interests, and where those interests coincide with another group's interests, they work together.
Right. I mean, well, it's sort of like we talked about with respect to Islamist terrorist cells for the last 25 or 35 years, which is part of the challenge is they're decentralized. And that's sort of the same thing here.
Exactly.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And you join us on the alphawealthgroup.com. Answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Mike Lindell and the MyPillow employees want to thank you for your great support this past year. They want to make 2026 the best year ever. So to thank you, they are giving